They taped the damn eviction notice to my front gate. Red ink, bold font, stamped seal like it was the Constitution itself. You have 72 hours to vacate this land, or you will be forcibly removed. That was the first sentence. I remember because I read it while standing in my boots, holding my morning coffee like a man might hold a rifle he didn't plan to fire unless provoked. My fingers clenched the paper. The steam from my mug curled into the air like a ghost trying to warn me. I could see her across the field. Diane Wilburn, HOA president. The woman who'd somehow turned a quiet lakeside community into her own little fiefdom. She sat in her golf cart with arms folded, chin raised like a monarch surveying her latest conquest. I swear she smiled when she saw me read it. Probably thought I'd panic. Maybe cry. Hell, maybe I'd start packing. What she didn't know, what nobody in that clipboard army of hers knew, was that 3 days prior I'd become the legal owner of the very clubhouse her HOA operated from. The pool, the tennis courts, even the parking lot where her throne on wheels now rested. All of it now mine. They hadn't just declared war. They marched into a battlefield I already controlled. That moment right there is when I made the call. Calmly, deliberately, I placed the coffee down on the fence post, pulled out my phone, and called my lawyer. "Let's triple the rent," I said. He paused. He's the kind of man who doesn't rattle easy. "You sure you want to go that hard?" he asked. "They gave me 72 hours to leave my own ranch," I replied. "Now I'm giving them 30 days to either pay 3 times more or get the hell out of my property." Then I hung up, and I walked back inside, past the dogs who sensed something brewing, past the front door my grandfather once hung with his own hands. I stood still in the foyer, quiet, like the house was listening, because this wasn't about land. Not really. It was about respect. It was about the slow erosion of dignity when people like Diane start to believe a clipboard gives them power over character. But before we go further, before this tale tightens its grip, let me step back. Let me show you how a simple man, a rancher with calloused hands and a quiet heart, ended up in a battle that would rattle an entire community. I'm Matthew Blake. Folks call me Matt. I inherited Blake Ranch from my grandfather, George Blake, a man who chewed tobacco like it was a religion and believed in God, poker, and keeping your word in that order. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. Tucked just outside Willow Creek, Texas, it ain't flashy. You won't find neon-lit barns or digital irrigation here. What you will find is fence line that's older than most marriages, cattle that know the sound of my truck, and a house that creaks in the same spots my granddad used to chuckle about. I wear denim, I fix what breaks, and I wake before the sun. That's who I am. But don't mistake quiet for weak, because folks like Diane do, and they make that mistake often. Diane Wilburn. I could spend pages describing her. But let me say this, imagine if a country club and a courtroom had a baby, and that baby grew up mean. She moved into Willow Creek Lakeside 5 years ago after retiring from a successful marketing career in Dallas. Didn't take long for her to run for HOA president. Didn't take long for the rules to multiply either. Citations for grass an inch too high. Tickets for garbage cans not angled just so. She wasn't just enforcing the rulebook. She rewrote the damn thing. Made folks scared to leave porch lights on past 10. Made good people feel small. There's one person who never shrank, though, Ricky Dawson. My neighbor. Single dad, mechanic, the kind of guy who carries a monkey wrench like a badge of honor. He's lived in the last house before ranch land starts, and ever since I helped him thaw a frozen water line during that brutal freeze 3 winters ago, we've been tight. Ricky's a talker. A good one. He hears things. And he warned me, "Matt," he said one day, "Diane's cooking something. She's been telling the HOA your barn's built on reserved land." I laughed at first, but laughter turned to frowns when strangers started walking their dogs suspiciously close to my fences. When drones buzzed above the barn like hornets with badges. And when HOA board members started taking photos near the buffer zone my family's owned since before Willow Creek even had an HOA. I didn't take it lying down. I went to the county, pulled every deed, every land survey, even a cocktail napkin sketch my granddad made once at the local diner. And it all said the same thing: Blake Ranch was intact. Legal. Undisputed. But Diane didn't care about truth. She cared about control. It started with small things. Letters accusing me of aesthetic violations. They said my black iron ranch gate didn't match the community standard of brown wood. Fines followed. More letters. Until finally 72 hours. That's when the idea came. See, I'd heard a rumor. A whisper, really. That the land the HOA clubhouse was built on wasn't owned by the HOA. It was leased. And the elderly man who owned it? He was selling. Retiring. Most folks thought it was gossip. But gossip can be gold if you know how to sift it. Through a friend in commercial real estate, I formed a holding company, BH Acquisitions. Quiet, untraceable to me. And when that parcel went on sale, I bought it. All legal. Paid in cash. Sealed tight. The deed arrived 3 days before that damn notice hit my gate. So when Diane delivered her ultimatum, she was standing on land I now owned. She just didn't know it. Not yet. Not when she smirked at me from her golf cart like a queen addressing a peasant. Not when she assumed I'd cower. And that, right there, is where folks like her always slip. They confuse silence with surrender. But let me tell you something, man to man. Every quiet man has a storm buried deep. And when that storm rises, it doesn't come with thunder. Comes with resolve. Comes with paperwork. Comes with rent tripled, due in 30 days and signed by me. But that's just where it begins. The real war, the one where truths are dragged into daylight and legacies get tested, that was just over the horizon. And I was ready, because this land doesn't just carry fence posts and grazing cattle. Carries a name, mine. And by God, no HOA president in a golf cart was going to take that from me. The next morning, I stood by the fence sipping my coffee when I saw the dust kick up on the gravel road. Diane's golf cart appeared like clockwork, trailed by 2 board members looking more like soldiers than volunteers. Clipboard in hand, lips pursed tighter than a bank vault, she came to deliver what she thought was the finishing blow. "Mr. Blake," she barked before even stepping off her cart. "You now have 71 hours. The board has reviewed your violations again, and it is unanimous. You are in direct violation of HOA Expansion Code Section 35-Alpha. Your presence here disrupts our master plan for aesthetic cohesion and community safety." That mouth of hers moved like it had never met the word no. I didn't even blink, just wiped my hands on a rag and nodded like she'd just offered me a weather report. "Appreciate the update," I said. She blinked. "You ever seen someone so sure of their authority they short-circuit when it doesn't work?" That was her face. Confused, cocky, starting to itch. "You don't seem concerned," she said, narrowing her eyes. "Oh, I'm concerned," I replied, letting the pause hang long enough to make her shift her weight. "But not about what you think." I walked off before she could fire back, left her standing there like a GPS that had lost signal. That afternoon, I hand-delivered the new lease to the HOA office. 1 copy for Diane, 1 for the board, 1 for the file. Rent tripled. Due in 30 days. Failure to pay meant eviction. Legal. Final. No loopholes. The next morning, the neighborhood erupted. Facebook groups lit up like a fireworks stand in July. Parents were whispering at the bus stops. Retirees paused their lawn mowing to chat nervously over hedges. And Diane? Diane lost her mind. She called an emergency board meeting within hours. She begged the mayor to intervene. Local paper ran a half-inch headline. Community faces conflict over clubhouse lease. That night, as Ricky and I sat on the porch drinking Shiner Bock, my phone buzzed. Motion alert. Barn camera. I opened the app and froze. 3 figures, black hoodies, creeping near the rear fence. One held what looked like bolt cutters. I dropped the beer, heart pounding, grabbed the keys. "They're trying to let the cattle out," I said. Ricky was already halfway to the truck. We barreled down the dirt road like a freight train missing its brakes. Gravel flew, headlights sliced through the trees. The truck skidded to a stop just as 2 cows stumbled through the gap in the fence. One figure slipped through the ditch and vanished into the dark. Another tried to scale the neighbor's hedge. The third, bless his clumsy soul, tripped over a feed bucket and landed face first. Ricky leapt from the truck like a linebacker, tackled him before I could even cut the engine. I grabbed the spotlight and followed. When I reached them, my blood turned cold. The man under Ricky's knee wasn't a stranger. It was Aaron Mills, HOA board secretary, Diane's favorite lapdog, always nodding at her commands like a bobblehead with a clipboard. His hood was half off, face red, eyes panicked. "You're trespassing," I growled, voice low, cold. "And you just damaged livestock property. You know what that means in Texas." He tried to speak, but the words choked out of him like he forgot how breath worked. "She just wanted to scare you," he said. "She told us you were a threat, that you were planning to take over the neighborhood." "She," Ricky muttered. "Let me guess. Diane." Aaron didn't answer. Didn't need to. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. His face, the cut fence, his gloves, the cows behind us still milling in confusion. "You're staying right here," I said, dialing the sheriff. "Please," he begged, voice trembling. "I have kids. I didn't know it would go this far." "You cut a man's fence in the dark," I said. "It already went too far." The sheriff arrived within 20 minutes. Small towns don't play when it comes to ranch property. Aaron was hauled off, still apologizing, still trying to shift the blame to Diane. But I didn't need apologies. I needed the truth out in the open. By morning, news had spread. Some folks were outraged. Others whispered. A few defended Diane, claiming I was escalating. That's when the rail kicker hit. A black SUV rolled up to my gate mid-morning. Out stepped Diane, dressed in cream-colored heels and a suit like she was headed to court or an overpriced brunch. She didn't say hello, just stood there, arms folded, sunglasses on. "You think you're clever," she said. "I know I am," I replied. "You bought that land behind our backs. That's unethical." "No," I said. "That's business. Your lease expired. You didn't renew it. That's not unethical, that's sloppy." Her lips curled. "You're going to ruin this community." "Funny," I said. "You said the same about me when you tried to kick me out of my own ranch." She pointed her finger, shaking slightly. "You don't belong here. You're a relic, a rotting barn with boots." "And yet," I smiled, "that rotting barn now owns your tennis court." That night we had a board meeting. In my building. I walked in with my lawyer, Mr. Templeton. Gray-haired, all business, briefcase clutched like it was a weapon. Diane sat at the end of the table, lips thin, arms tight. "This is extortion," she hissed before we even started. Templeton pushed his glasses up his nose. "It's market-adjusted valuation. You can accept or vacate, but you cannot occupy without payment. That's called squatting, ma'am." One of the board members, Susan, leaned forward. "Diane," she asked quietly, "did you know the lease was expiring?" Diane hesitated. "I assumed it would renew automatically." "You assumed wrong," Templeton said, "and you filed an eviction notice against the property owner. That could qualify as harassment." Silence fell. The air in that room felt like a stretched rubber band. Diane stood suddenly. "This isn't over." Then she stormed out. Susan looked at me. "Matt," she said softly, "some of us didn't know. Some of us were misled. We believed you were encroaching on community land." I nodded. "I know. That's what Diane wanted you to think." She hesitated, then added, "If she's hiding other things, I'll find them. And when I do, I'll bring them to you." I didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. The battle had begun. Not just for my land, but for truth. And truth, like the soil under my boots, runs deep, and it never lies. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of fear, but out of calculation. A man doesn't stay awake just to worry, he stays awake to count moves, to map out every possible counterstrike. That's what my grandfather taught me. "Panic is for prey," he used to say. But we weren't raised for running. So I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring out across the yard. Somewhere out there was a woman who wanted me gone so bad. She'd sent her board dogs to do her dirty work, and now she was running out of leash. Around 2 a.m., I decided to check my camera feeds again. The barn, the gate, the front porch, and one newer one-eyed placed by the back workshop just in case. I clicked through the recordings, nothing out of place, until 2:14. My hand froze on the mouse. A figure moved across the gravel, slow, crouched low like a shadow that didn't want to be seen. He crept along the workshop wall, then reached into his hoodie and pulled out something, long and thin like a wire or tool. Popped the side window open and slipped inside like he'd done it before. I rewound and zoomed in. The camera wasn't high-end, but when he turned, just for a split second, I caught the profile. It wasn't Aaron this time. It was Tyler, Diane Wilburn's son. College graduate, entitled brat, always carried himself like the town owed him something. He'd spoken at one of those HOA town halls months ago, smirking through every sentence like he was auditioning for a reality show. Diane used to say, "My son Tyler will help oversee the next phase of expansion when he returns home." Well, guess what, Diane, your golden boy just broke into my damn property. I downloaded the footage, backed it up in 3 different folders, and emailed a copy to my attorney. "Let's see her spin this," I muttered to myself. But as I was reaching to shut the laptop, headlights washed across the front porch. A black sedan, engine still running. Then, a dull thump against the front gate. I walked out barefoot, shotgun leaned but not loaded yet. There, propped against the gate, was a thick manila envelope. No name, no stamp. Inside were 3 photographs. One of my truck parked outside town hall. One of me shaking hands with Sheriff Mendes near my fence line. And the third, me sitting on my own porch, coffee in hand, taken from the treeline. My stomach twisted. This wasn't surveillance. This was a message. Ricky pulled up half an hour later. I showed him the photos without saying a word. He stared, jaw clenched. "They're watching you," he said finally. "And they want you to know it." "Let 'em watch," I said. "But they won't like what happens next." The next morning, I went straight to Sheriff Mendes. He examined the photos, lips pressed tight. "We're keeping eyes on Tyler," he said. "But he's smart enough to stay hidden. For now." I nodded. "Then we'll smoke him out the honest way." But honest didn't last long. That Wednesday, I got a call from Susan. Her voice trembled. "You need to come to the HOA office. Now." When I arrived, the door was kicked in. Papers scattered. Chairs flipped. A pungent streak of spray paint across the wall in angry red letters. "We're taking it back." This wasn't just protest. This was declaration. "Tyler," Ricky said beside me, arms folded. "Same handwriting as that traitor graffiti on your barn." Susan appeared from the back room, face pale. "Some folks think you provoked this," she said. "They think Diane was keeping order." I didn't answer. I was too busy looking around at the chaos. The broken frames, the tipped coffee machine, the faint smell of gasoline near the doorway. And I knew what came next. That night, I called a second town meeting. Not official. Not in the gym. Just at the square. We set up folding chairs. I brought copies of everything, photos, lease agreements, video stills of Tyler at the workshop window. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't preach. I just told the truth. Most listened. A few didn't. At the back stood 3 boys, barely old enough to rent a car. Friends of Tyler. Arms crossed. Not speaking, but glaring. After the crowd dispersed, Ricky and I drove home, headlights barely keeping up with the winding road. We pulled in just after midnight. I was halfway to the porch when I heard it. A boom. Not a gunshot. Not a car backfire. An explosion. We turned and saw the glow instantly. The barn. My grandfather's barn. The one he'd built with his own hands, timber by timber. Flames were crawling up its sides like snakes lit on fire. I bolted. Ricky grabbed the hose. We fought it. We sprayed and shouted and opened the livestock gate. The horses ran. The goats bolted. The smoke choked us, but we kept going. By the time the fire crew arrived, it was too late. The barn was gone. Ashes. Melted tin. A wheelbarrow wheel twisted like a pretzel. Sheriff Mendes arrived not long after. He took one look and walked the perimeter. "Found the remains of a starter device," he said. "Accelerant, fuse, broken beer bottle. Classic firebomb." Tyler, I muttered. Probably, the sheriff said. But no fingerprints. No witnesses. No prints on the gate, either. I didn't speak, just stared at the smoking heap. The next morning, another package arrived. No return address. Inside, a photo of my grandfather's gravestone. Vandalized. Spray painted. Traitor in block red letters. And beneath it, smaller, sloppier, burn with your barn. That's when I cracked the coffee mug in my hand without realizing. Ricky saw the photo, said nothing. Just stood, walked to the gun cabinet and pulled out his old Remington. That's it, he said. No more waiting. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. And justice needs light. So I made one more call. Not to a lawyer. Not to the sheriff. To Claire Rogers, a small-town investigative journalist with a reputation for burning through cover-ups like dry grass. She arrived the next day, notepad ready, recorder in hand. We sat for hours. I gave her everything. The documents, the videos, even the vandalized headstone. She listened, took notes, asked questions. Then, at the end, she said, "They think they can bury you with noise, but you've got the truth. That's heavier than fire." That evening, I emailed every contact I had. We scheduled a public vote, a special HOA election. 1 week from Sunday, we'd take the board back. We'd clean house. And this time, it wouldn't be about bylaws and fines, it would be about people. About home. About standing your damn ground. Tyler may have started a fire, but I was about to light something bigger. The week leading up to the special HOA election felt like waiting for a storm that wouldn't let me sleep. I'd planted signs around town. HOA election, Sunday at 6 p.m., Community Hall. Sent personal invites with a short note. Tell the truth. Vote for the people. Sheriff Mendes kept an eye out, quietly placing a deputy by my gate each night. Little comforts when your mailbox's next threat could be dynamite tied to a match. I spent evenings on the porch, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the ridge line where my grandfather once painted horses. Ricky joined me most nights. We didn't need words. A nod was enough. That's where the trust lived. In unspoken brotherhood. Finally, Sunday evening came. The hall was packed tighter than a high school homecoming. Folding chairs lined up, locals in cowboy hats and Levi's, reporters with cameras rolling. I watched the room swell as old neighbors filed past. Teachers I'd helped feed their cows during winter crashes, store owners I'd fixed fence for free, retirees who waved when I drove by. And at the back, leaning against the wall like a shadow, were Tyler and Diane. Tyler in 2 new boots, Diane in a stiff blue dress that looked ready for a deposition instead of a community meeting. Their presence made the room's temperature drop. I stepped up to the mic, heart pounded, but not from fear, from purpose. "Folks," I began, voice steady, "I didn't ask for any of the spotlight, but when your home's under siege, when your land and your legacy are painted as threats, you show up." I clicked the remote, a still on the big screen. Spray paint bleeding across my grandfather's headstone. They gasped. I moved to the next. The still from the barn footage, Tyler at the window, face half hidden. Audible murmurs. Then documents. Board meeting minutes Diane forged. HOA funds traced to her personal account. Audit from Susan's files showing transactions labeled maintenance that never happened. The room went quiet enough you could hear a pin drop. As I spoke, I felt the room shift. Old Mr. Jenkins, who once voted Diane in, leaned forward and mouthed, "I'm sorry." The Whitaker twins held hands. Teen girl Ellie in the corner held up a sign, "Vote for Matt." That hurt-turned pride lumped in my throat until I swallowed hard and kept going. When I finished, I stepped aside. Sheriff Mendes took the stage, quiet but commanding. "Raise your hand if you believe these facts should be investigated further," he said. Hundreds of hands shot up. He nodded. "Good. That's how a community holds each other accountable." That set the tone. Then the ballots came out. 1 per household, transparent box. Susan and 2 elders monitored. I watched while votes dropped in. Wasn't about me. It was about the collective heartbeat of this town. A few minutes later, the clerk called out results. For President Matthew Blake, 96 votes. For Vice President Susan Rodriguez, 89. Ricky Dawson for board member, 92. The applause was immediate. A few cried, some clapped. A sigh of relief rolled through the hall. My eyes met the sheriff's. He gave me a small nod. The tide had turned. Diane and Tyler stood frozen. Diane stormed past me, accusation in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she spat. Tyler sneered, but the crowd parted like a wave calm. Sure, tonight, power shifted. But I wasn't going to gloat. Not a man's victory. Not when there was work to be done. That night we stood on the front porch. Bright stars. Cool breeze. I felt heavy, full of responsibility. Ricky handed me a cold soda. "Hell of a night," he said. "You did good." I didn't answer, just emptied the can and stared at the horizon. Next morning, Diane had disappeared from public view. The clubhouse office locked up, HOA website down, but not going quietly. Within days, I got word she filed arbitration papers, claiming procedural errors in election. Tyler filed lawsuits, alleging defamation, trespassing. My peaceful Sunday had turned into months-long legal war. But this was expected. They were going to make this ugly, to outlast me, to muddy waters, to confuse people long enough for the tide to recede. But I've been around longer than any of them. I've seen town dramas come and go. This won't be another leaf in the wind. That afternoon I called Claire Rogers. "They're suing," I said. She didn't flinch. "Good," she replied. "Pile every shred of documents into a story. Show how they retaliated. Don't just publish. Boost it. Share it statewide." The next morning, a headline popped. "Ranchers Rise. How Matthew Blake did what Diane never could." It spread across news feeds, Facebook, and local talk shows. State news vans rolled in, cameras at the gate across the ridge. My neighbors brought pies and letters. "Thank you, and we knew it" notes poured in. People were waking up. The wind had already shifted. Now they felt it on their face. Meanwhile, Diane's camp grew frantic. Flyers appeared on mailboxes. "Beware of false narratives. Vote again." Emails circulated. "Fraudulent election. Call us." But the sheriff already had statements from Aaron and Tyler's vandalism video. Susan handed him forged documents. Evidence stacked up like fence posts in a new line. And the public? They listened. The coffee shop chatter changed. "Matt saved the truth," one customer told the barista. "About time someone stood up." One afternoon, Tyler showed up at my gate. No entourage, no swagger, just standing there with a stack of papers. "You won't be able to defend the lawsuit," he said quietly. I invited him in, told him to sit. Ricky and Susan watched from the porch, silent. Tyler handed over legal filings, defamation, interference, land claim. He looked at me expectantly. I met his eyes. "You're wrong," I said. He looked away. "I'll respond. With facts." He nodded, rose, and left without a word. Evening fell. I sat on the porch alone with a beer, hat tilted low. Cameras flashed at the gate. I thought of my grandfather, of his hands building that barn, of the cattle that grazed peacefully, of standing tall when storms came. That's when I made a decision. Not revenge, not retreat, rebuild. I walked inside and called a meeting with the new board. Susan, Ricky, 2 longtime neighbors. We stayed late, laying out plans. Community fence repairs, clubhouse hires, financial transparency, welcome committees. We weren't going to purge HOA. We'd polish it, keep it honest. Rural sense over record-keeping tyranny. Hands over lines, not clipboards and threats. The next day, we posted a letter to the neighborhood. "We hear you. We're here. Let's build trust. No bombast, just sincerity." By nightfall, I walked by the barn foundation. The beams were gone, but the footprint remained. The earth still smelled of new grass and old ash. I touched the foundation, felt warm. I could start again, build something stronger. A barn built on truth, community built on respect. The morning after our first official HOA board meeting, I found a dead chicken on my porch. Neck snapped. No blood, no signs of animal. Just laid there, stiff like a warning. Next to it, a handwritten note on greasy notebook paper. You think the election was the end? We're just starting. No name, just initials, TW. I didn't flinch. I'd seen worse in the war, worse in droughts, worse when cancer took my father. But something about a man who hides behind dead animals made my blood simmer. Ricky found me burying the bird behind the barn. Want me to sit out tonight? He asked, cocking his head toward the porch. I shook my head. Let M come. Just don't let M leave without knowing we noticed. That week, town sentiment swung like a rusty gate in the wind. Half the folks were with us. The other half, they weren't against me, but they were afraid of Tyler. He wasn't just making noise now. He was making phone calls. To banks. To permit offices. To realtors. One day Susan told me she caught wind he was working a deal to have the HOA clubhouse declared an independent entity, claiming it was improperly zoned at time of lease transfer. If successful, it would nullify my ownership and revert control back to the original HOA trust. Run, of course, by a proxy Diane had set up before she was arrested. I didn't know whether to be impressed or furious. Probably both. But more than anything, I felt protective. This wasn't about a pool or a building anymore. It was about a group of people, my neighbors, being used like pawns in a game they never asked to play. So we pushed forward. Transparency reports, HOA public spending bulletins, town square check-ins. We created a volunteer response team to help older residents fix fences, clean gutters, and feel safe again. Even started a weekend potluck on the third Sunday of each month. And for a while it worked. The air felt lighter. Kids rode bikes again. The community Facebook group went from all-caps accusations to recipe swaps. Then came the subpoena. Tyler was suing again, this time not just me or Susan, but the entire new board. He claimed we manipulated the election, falsified turnout, and used emotional coercion to unseat a legally elected board. He cited phone records, camera angles, even audio snippets taken from that livestream Q&A we held weeks back. I remember reading the packet on my porch, jaw tight. Emotional coercion, I muttered. Since when is telling the truth emotional coercion? Ricky looked up from under the hood of his truck. Since losing started feeling personal. I called Sheriff Mendes that night. Told him I had a hunch this lawsuit was smoke meant to hide a fire. He listened carefully, then said, Matt, you remember that name? Bradley Tomlinson? The lawyer? I asked. Yeah, the one Tyler brought in during the clubhouse mess. He just bought 2 lots near the lake using an LLC tied to Diane's cousin. You think they're building a fallback nest? I asked. I think they're trying to control the whole damn town, Mendes said flatly. Parcel by parcel. Rulebook by rulebook. We needed to go on offense. Not just defend against lawsuits or fix fences, but dismantle the machine Diane had built. I told Susan and Ricky to dig deep, find any shadow companies, board proxies, backdoor charters. Took us 2 weeks, but we found it. A shell nonprofit called Willow Civic Enhancement Corp., formed 6 months ago, right before Diane's eviction campaign began. Listed address? P.O. Box in Dallas. Listed agent? T. Wilburn. Tyler had set up his own HOA by another name, and if the court ever ruled against our board, this group was positioned to step in and provide continuity. Translation: he was prepping a coup, dressed in civic clothing. I wasn't about to let that happen. I made a call to Claire Rogers, the journalist who first broke our story. She came back with her notepad and fire in her eyes. This time, we gave her everything. Emails, land records, HOA archives, the Civic Corp filings. She went quiet for 4 days. Then her article dropped like a hammer. How a son tried to finish his mother's dirty work. The Tyler Wilburn strategy. Within hours, it trended across state feeds. Local radio lit up. The mayor issued a statement supporting our board. Donations came in, small amounts, but enough to fund legal defense. One man from Austin sent a check and a note. I don't live there, but I know tyranny when I smell it. Tyler responded the only way snakes do, by striking low. One night, Ricky's truck was keyed, his tires slashed. Susan's mailbox lit on fire. And me? My power got cut. Not the whole house, just the workshop. No explanation from the utility company. I called. They blamed infrastructure assessment delays. Sheriff traced it back to a fake complaint filed using my address. That same night, a drone hovered over my pasture for nearly an hour, zipping just above the barn roof. I stood there with a flashlight and a Remington, just waiting for it to land. Then came the final play, the one that told me this war wasn't about rules anymore. It was about heart. Tyler filed a petition to reclassify Blake Ranch as transition land, arguing it no longer functioned as a traditional farm due to HOA proximity and changing county development goals. If passed, it could make ranching illegal on parts of my own property. The hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought every neighbor who ever set foot on my land, every person I'd helped during floods, ice storms, barn fires. We packed the hearing room. When it was my turn, I stood up, held the petition high, and said, I don't know what makes a piece of land transitional, but I know what makes it home. It's blood, sweat, animals, fence wire, and Sunday coffee. And I'll be damned if some bureaucrat lets a bitter son erase my grandfather's legacy because he lost a vote. The county board ruled unanimously in my favor. They called Tyler's petition malicious and unsupported. The crowd clapped. A few cried. One man offered to help rebuild the barn with his own timber. And just like that, the final nail in the coffin was set. The lawsuits dropped. The civic corp dissolved. Tyler vanished. Weeks later, I stood on the porch again. Same chair, same sky. Ricky grilled steaks out back. Susan brought cornbread. Mendes showed up with a six-pack and no badge. We ate, we laughed, and we planned the first honest HOA picnic the town had seen in years. A kid rode by on a bike and waved. That's when I knew. The fight was over. Not because we crushed the enemy, but because we outlasted their lies. We stood still while they spun themselves into dust. I looked at the fence line, the pasture, the rebuilt barn, and the clean gravestone where my grandfather rested. We're still here, I whispered, not to anyone, just to the land, just to myself, just to him. And that, my friend, is how you hold your ground.